Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Monday, September 30th, 2019. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the best movies at Fantastic Fest 2019. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Managing Editor Jacob Hall.
Hello, hello.
And writer Chris Evangelista.
Hello, folks.
So you guys are both back after being in Austin for a week for Fantastic Fest. How was the festival?
I'll defer to Chris here because this is his first time at this fest. Chris, how was your first Fantastic Fest?
It was a lot of fun. It's very exhausting. I've done several film festivals, and I actually think this is probably the most exhausting because
why? Because are you staying up and partying and stuff, or
it's so TIFF is very much a working festival in that you're always working, you're always going to movies, and somehow that is less exhausting than this because yes, you're working, yes, you're seeing movies, but Fantastic Fest is very much a social festival, and socializing, at least for me, is exhausting. I get really tired just having to talk to people a lot, and don't get me wrong, I had a great time hanging out with people. I get to see people I don't normally see, but after a while, it wears you down. And also, you're even though you're in one building pretty much the entire day.
I was going to say, TIFF, you're running around Toronto. You're like running from one side to the other. Here, you're like staying in the same theater, and you're, basically sitting there. You don't even have to leave the theater to eat food, even.
Right. Well, that's my next point. Yes, you're in one building, but all the food in that building is really bad for you. And there's also just a constant opportunity to drink alcohol. So basically, you're talking with people all day, you're eating terrible food, and you're drinking all day. And after a while, it
by the way,
you out.
Those three things you described, I think, would be like a party for everybody else. But to you, it's exhausting.
It is a party and it's fun, but if you're partying every night, it's gonna tire you out. Not even like rock stars can keep up this level of consistency. And I did pretty well, but by my second to last night, I was pretty much ready to collapse. And my last day there, I was so out of it that I almost regretted. Because the night before my last night, I did, the full blowout with, karaoke and all that stuff. And I kind of, as much fun as I had, the next day I was so dead to the world that I wished I had planned better. Because my last day there, I was pretty much just like a zombie.
Chris, I have to ask, because people need to know, what song did you sing at karaoke?
I did several songs at karaoke. I did Possum Kingdom by the Toadies. I did I'll Make a Man Out of You from Mulan. I did Flagpole Sitta by Harvey Danger. I did a lot of songs. And
you used to be in a band.
I was the lead singer of a band.
Yeah, so there you go. If someone can Google and find some songs from Chris, are they available anywhere online?
I don't think so, and we're all the better for it.
Okay, so we're going to go through both of your top 10 lists for the festival. I'm wondering, there really isn't much crossover here at all. There's only one film, and we'll talk about that when we get to, that film reoccurring. But why is that? Did you guys see different movies?
I think a big piece of it is that there was a very large chunk of the festival this year that was also playing at TIFF. So I don't think Chris included anything you saw there. Am I correct?
Right, yeah. All the quote-unquote big movies, the big showy movies like Knives Out and The Lighthouse and stuff like that, I had already seen at TIFF, and some other stuff I had seen elsewhere, like The Lodge I saw at Sundance. So there was a lot of crossover. So I mostly focused on smaller things and like obscure things that I really had no real info about going into and stuff like that.
Jacob, how is your Fantastic Fest this year? Because I know you go every year, and this is your favorite time of the year.
Yeah, it was a good fest. I mean, every year it's, as Chris said, it's an excuse to drink, eat, see people, and party. It's all in one location. Even when you're working, you can sort of jot off to the press area, which is 30 seconds from a bar, and even drink while you work. So it is very much an excuse to have a good time, and it is the best run festival I've ever been to. I feel like the press people there really genuinely care about our job and really go out of their way to help us. There was never a situation where I was needing for something as a member of the press, and because of the system that you operate in at the fest, where there's no lines, you choose what you want to see via a lottery system, and you wait for your number to be called, and you just walk in whenever it's time. There's just no tension. There's no sense of dread. Like, there's so many times I'll be in a 2-hour-long line at Subway Southwest, and I'm wondering, am I going to get into this movie I need to see because I need to see it for work. The press people aren't responding. Oh my God, what do I do? But Fantastic Fest, if I need something for work, I know if I'm getting in that day. I know 24 hours in advance, and it allows me to. It makes covering the festival and attending it a breeze. And I know Chris made it sound exhausting. It is if you do want to have the full party experience, but there is no festival that I think is more pleasurable to actually physically attend.
Yeah, I know when I was going, and by the way, even if you don't do the full party experience, if you're just in that one location seeing movies, you could see more movies than I think any other festival because of that whole setup. Because
you're guaranteed 5 movies a day if you fill up the lottery system the day before. You're guaranteed 5 movies a day if you choose to see that many.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. Okay, let's get into it. Let's start at number 10. Jacob, what was your number 10?
My number 10 is a film Chris saw at TIFF. Out of Space, Richard Stanley's H.P. Lovecraft adaptation starring Nicolas Cage. This film seems to have divided people. I am a big Lovecraft fan, and I think Richard Stanley's approach here works, which is to adapt Lovecraft's cosmic horror ideas with zero irony and zero sense of modern self-deprecation, which means that the silliest ideas of the original story are presented with such a straight face that some people find them funny or cheesy or hokey. Personally, I really dug it. I dug that it takes the big sci-fi horror ideas very seriously, and I was able to roll with the fact that the tone, is so self-serious and earnest. And Nicolas Cage is doing really big, crazy work here in ways I don't think always work for the film, but I ultimately came down the side of thinking that he's always worth watching. He's a lot of fun here. Also, if you're like a big fan of like old school weird fiction and Lovecraft, there's a ton of Easter eggs. It made me really want to see Richard Stanley or people at Spectrovision who produced this film just make more low budget, but serious minded H.P. Lovecraft movies. And yeah, Color Out of Space. I think it's going to be streaming by the end of the year, I believe, or it's available on VOD in some capacity. And it's a very good Lovecraft adaptation. It's certainly, more serious than Reanimator and more serious than Dagon and other movies that tend to do a goofy version of that kind of horror. So I'm really happy to see it, and I enjoyed it a lot.
And Chris, what is your number 10?
My number 10 is a film called In the Tall Grass, which is a adaptation of a Stephen King and Joe Hill short story. Joe Hill is, if anyone doesn't know, Stephen King's son, actually. And I don't love this adaptation, but I appreciate it. I think if I hadn't read the story beforehand, I'd like this even more because the story is really, really nasty, and it has this really bleak ending, and the movie kind of chickens out. It kind of takes the coward's way out, and it tries to have its cake and eat it too, in that it gives itself a lot of dark and twisted stuff, but it also tries to lighten it up a bit. And I get that. I get they were trying to make it more palatable. At the same time, it's a lot of fun to watch. Patrick Wilson is in this, and he is having a ball playing, for lack of a better term, the villain of the piece, where he's just this completely crazy guy wandering around in this tall grass, and he keeps trying to drive everyone around him crazy as well. And it's clear that he's having a great time, and watching him have a great time makes the movie a lot of fun. And I wish it had been a bit more like the story. I wish it had kept the story's bleakness, but if I separate myself from the story, I do enjoy what you'll see here. And this is going to be dropping on Netflix later this month.
Yeah. Okay. Number 9. Jacob, what is your number 9?
Number 9 is Sweetheart, new film from director J.D. Dillard, and you've seen his first film, Slight, right?
Yeah, I really loved it. I saw it at Sundance a few years back, and he's actually attached to do a remake of The Fly. So his career is kind of skyrocketing upward. I'm very interested to hear what you thought of this film.
Sweetheart is really good, and it's not at all what I was expecting. It's 82 minutes long. It has very little dialogue. And Kiersey Clemons from Hearts Beat Loud plays a woman who is shipwrecked on a deserted island. She washed up with the dead body of one of her friends, and soon learns she's not alone on this island. Every night, a creature emerges from the ocean looking to hunt and collect food. And it's just an incredibly intense, almost one-person show where Kiersey Clemons has to survive on an island by the day by finding food and shelter, and by night by hiding from a monster. And it is incredibly intense. It has I don't know if the shot's in the trailer or not, so I haven't watched the trailer, and I hope they don't reveal it. But it has one of the best monster reveal shots I've seen since Signs. You know that scene in Signs, Peter, where Joaquin Phoenix is watching the videotape from that birthday party, and the alien appears, and it's amazing. Yeah. It's that good. It's like there's that scene, and now this one. It is an exceptionally good monster reveal, and the movie lives up to that reveal for the most part. When the monster is practical, and most of its close-ups, it's a really effective design. The budget is stretched a little thin when it's CGI and some more dynamic shots, but overall, this is mostly a testament to how good Clemons is. It's a one-woman show, and how well J.D. Dillard's able to bring suspense out of woman versus monster in ways that I found increasingly entertaining. Even though there are some dips here and there, but this movie's going straight to VOD in October, and it should be a big screen movie. It's a Blumhouse production. It's low budget. But there's nothing in this movie that says VOD, B-movie junk. It is an extremely slick, beautifully made, well-acted horror movie. It's an exceptional creature feature. Chris, I know you had a screener for this. Did you catch up with this?
I actually watched it just last night, and I did enjoy it a lot. I do think it does have that dip that you mentioned, but that monster reveal is great. And what I really liked most about this movie is that it is what it's selling. I kept waiting for a really dumb twist where it's like, oh, the monster is all in her head and she's just crazy, because I feel like no one can just make a straightforward monster movie anymore. They have to add some big dumb twist like that. And that never happens. It's literally just her fighting a monster, and it's so simple. And I was like, I like how simple that is. So yeah, I did like this, but I didn't include it on my list just because I felt like I watched it last night, so it doesn't really count. I didn't really watch it at Fantastic Fest.
Yeah. Okay. What is your number 9, Chris?
My number 9 is The Wave, and this is a movie that caught me by surprise. I knew nothing about this going into it. This should also not be confused with another movie called The Wave, which also played Fantastic Fest a few years back, which is about a literal wave, like a tidal wave. This is a film. It stars Justin Long. He's this really shady corporate lawyer, and the movie starts off, it's him in his office, and I was like, uh-oh, this is going to be terrible, because it's the first 5 minutes are filled with these really bro-y, douchebaggy jokes, and I was like, is this what the whole movie's going to be? Because if it is, I need to get up and leave. But it actually turns into this really strange, oddly sweet movie where he goes out to celebrate a big deal he's closing as part of being a lawyer, and he takes this mysterious drug from this mysterious guy at this mysterious party, and the drug literally enables him to travel through time. And I won't say too much more, because the less you know, the more fun the movie is. But really, the movie is all about him learning to be less of an asshole. So it's sort of like a time travel version of Groundhog Day. You know how Groundhog Day is all about Bill Murray's character learning to be not an asshole, and that's really what this is. It's about Justin Long's character learning to be a better person. So
is this like Russian Doll? In a way, kind
of. Russian Doll is a million times better than what this is, but this is just something I like I said, I knew nothing about it, and so it sort of caught me by surprise about how how enjoyable it is. And there's a lot of like trippy visuals in it, and Justin Long is pretty good in this. He does a good job carrying a lot of he has to do a lot in this movie. He has to balance a bunch of stuff, and he does a pretty good job doing it all. So this is one of those movies I don't know if anyone's ever going to see it. Like, I feel like this is something that's going to go like straight to VOD and no one will talk about it. So if you hear about it, check it out. The Wave.
That's too bad. I just tried to add it to my letterbox to the films, I want to see, and it was even hard finding it on the list on Letterboxd. So
right, because I think there's like 30 movies called The Wave. It doesn't help that it has that really generic title, but it is worth saying.
Yeah. Jacob, what's your number 8?
My number 8 is Chris's number 3, so I'm going to defer to him and we'll talk together when we get there.
Okay. Chris, your number 8 then, I guess.
My number 8 is a movie called Fractured, and this is directed by Brad Anderson, who directed Session 9. And Brad Anderson really hates hospitals because this movie, like Session 9, is about a spooky hospital. The hospital here is actually occupied, unlike Session 9, where it's an abandoned hospital. And this movie, it stars Sam Worthington, who's one of those Australian actors who is normally very bland and very dry and really should probably just stop being in movies. But he's surprisingly really good in this. This is, I think, without question, like the best performance he's ever given. This movie, it's very predictable. You're going to know where it's going right from the start. But Brad Anderson directs the hell out of this, so much so that it made me really just look past how obvious it was and just really get on the same wavelength of, what he was trying to do here. I almost don't want to say the synopsis because the synopsis will literally give away what the hell's going on here. But basically, Sam Worthington and his family, they have a sort of accident and they end up in a hospital. And Sam Worthington's wife and daughter disappear. And then everyone starts telling him oh, you checked into this hospital alone. And this is a very tired and true plotline. Alfred Hitchcock did this story on a train. It's called The Lady Vanishes. And that was later remade as a movie called Flight Plan with Jodie Foster, where she's on a plane and her daughter disappears and everyone says, you never had a daughter. So the story itself is nothing new. So if you've seen either of those movies, you might know where this is going. But I kind of enjoyed it despite how obvious it was.
It's laundry folding the movie. It's like the ideal Netflix film. You put it on while you do your laundry. It's not bad. I think Chris liked it more than I did, but it's hitting Netflix soonish, and it's totally fine. Brad
Anderson's one of those directors that I think should get more credit than he does. He did, you mentioned Session 9, but he did The Machinist. He did Trans-Siberian. He did, there's a bunch of movies. He did some, what was that movie? The first movie I saw him do, Next Stop Wonderland, but I'm thinking of, there's a time travel, Happy Accidents. He's done some good stuff and some good TV too. He's done episodes of The Killing and,
he's a really good filmmaker who does sort of bargain basement movies. He did that movie The Call with Halle Berry where she's a 911 operator, and that movie's actually really entertaining. I avoided seeing it in theaters because the trailer looked like garbage, but I watched it on Blu-ray or whatever, and it's it's a trashy thriller, but it's so well done. He's a good director. He just sort of makes these really low-grade movies that no one cares about.
Do you think he's just picking bad movies?
I don't know. Maybe he just thinks maybe he thinks they're good. I mean, Session 9 is, I think, a legitimately great movie, and I don't think he's ever been able to really top that. But yeah, I don't really know what his deal is.
Jacob, what is your number 7?
My number 7 is a film that Ben saw at Sundance earlier this year, The Death of Dick Long. It's from director Daniel Scheinert. He's one half of the team that made Swiss Army Man a few years ago, but he's solo this time around. And as the title implies, the movie opens with a man named Dick Long is dead, and his buddy's dropping off at the hospital. And they spend the first half of this movie desperately trying to keep how he died a secret, and the back half of the movie trying to keep things from boiling over even worse. And it is, and I want to say it compared to Fargo in that it's set in Alabama, and it's very attuned to the region. It never quite makes fun of Alabama, even though Alabama's the source of a lot of the humor. It is actually very affectionate and tender, and loves its characters and like loves its region, even though it acknowledges how backwards it can be. And the main characters are not criminals. They're not like masterminds. So watching these very ordinary hillbilly types try to cover up what happened to their buddy is at first very tense, and then very funny, and then very horrifying. And as you learn what happened to Dick Long, it shouldn't work as well as it does. But the movie is so in tune with its characters and so measured in how it treats the situation that it's really hard to fall off the rails. If I told you what happened to Dick Long and told you the plot synopsis of this like in a Wikipedia style format, you'd roll your eyes. Like if I knew what this was about beforehand, I probably would not have watched it. But it is so funny and so tense, and treats some really awful subject matter with a certain amount of humanity that I was not expecting. So this is the death of Dick Long. It's hitting theaters later this year. It is go in not knowing much. Don't read any synopsis other than know that it is going to ask you to empathize with some really gnarly behavior.
Okay. Chris, what is your number 7?
It is another Netflix movie. There's a lot of Netflix movies at Fantastic Fest. And it is called In the Shadow of the Moon. And it's from Jim Mickle, who he directed a horror movie called Stakeland. He directed this movie called Cold in July, which I really like, which I also think like no one on Earth has seen except me. But this movie, it's this really weird hybrid of like every single genre. It's horror, it's sci-fi, it's mystery, it's action, it's a thriller, it's like all that and more, and it's really ambitious, and it doesn't quite stick the landing. Like it goes for this sort of really big emotional ending that I really think they were trying to be like they saw Arrival and they were like, oh, we need a big emotional Arrival ending, and they don't quite get there. But it's beyond that. I really liked how well made this was made. This is another movie that stars a really boring guy. It stars Boyd Holbrook, who I think is one of the most boring actors on the planet, and I feel like if he weren't in this movie, it would be so much better. But the fact that he's in it, it's not as good as it could be. This movie, it's set in Philadelphia, which always interests me because I grew up in Philadelphia, and even though this movie was clearly shot in Canada, it doesn't really, like, the skyline is obviously Philadelphia, but every time they cut to a street, it's like, oh, that is not a single street anywhere in Philadelphia. But it's about Boyd Holbrook is this cop, and every 9 years this serial killer just sort of surfaces out of nowhere, and she kills people in really gruesome ways, and he becomes obsessed with trying to find out, who she is and where she comes from and what her motives are. And it spans several decades. Like it starts in the 80s and it ends, in present day. And it gets a little muddled with what it's trying to say. But the execution is so well done. Like I don't think this was a big budget movie, but it looks great. And there's some really great like action scenes in this movie that I didn't realize Jim Mickle had in him, because he tends to direct really sort of lower key movies. But there's a few like big chase sequences that look really exciting. So I'm very curious to see if like this gets him like bigger budgets and it lets him make like bigger movies.
And this is good. It's also streaming now, I think. Like it literally started streaming the day after Fantastic Fest ended. And it's really worth your time. It is a really, really interesting movie, and I don't want to say more than that, other than that I really enjoyed it as well.
I actually thought Stakeland was going to get him more work. Not that that is an amazing movie, but it's a high concept thing that was done on a low budget, and it felt like, he would get bigger meetings from that, but I don't know what happened. Jacob, what is your number 6?
My number 6 is a film that Chris saw and enjoyed out of TIFF, and that is Dolemite Is My Name, new film from director Craig Brewer. And this is Eddie Murphy's big return to form, where he plays Rudy Ray Moore, an aspiring entertainer in the 70s who creates a new onstage persona and decides that his character deserves his own movie, and ends up making Dolemite, one of the seminal blaxploitation films of that era. And this film is, in many ways, it's Ed Wood, a Tim Burton film, but for blaxploitation, which makes sense because it's written by the same writers and they kind of follow that same format. But don't fix what isn't broken, because Dolemite Is My Name is as good as Ed Wood. It is spectacular. It's funny. It is one of those movies about a group of outcasts who come together to make a art project that they shouldn't be doing, but it works anyway. And I love movies like that. And Eddie Murphy is really funny, but also really moving as Rudy Ray Moore, because he's allowed to bring out his typical mannerisms when he performs, when he's playing a character on stage or on the film within a film. I mean, but also just the quieter scenes between those, where he's struggling to make ends meet, where he's battling his inner demons, where he's trying to come to terms with the fact that he's in his 40s and is just now trying to break out. It's really moving stuff, and Murphy really brings his A game to it. And it's not a Netflix movie. There's a big Netflix presence at Fantastic Fest this year, and I thought it was such a great crowd movie. Everybody was having a great time cheering and applauding and laughing, and it'll play well at home. But I definitely feel like this is the kind of movie that Netflix should have looked into giving a wide release, because it's the kind of movie that Eddie Murphy should be looking at an Oscar nomination. It should be a $100 million crowd-pleasing movie. But here we are. It's going to be on Netflix in about a month, and Dolemite Is My Name. If you like Ed Wood, if you like Eddie Murphy, if you like movies about movie making, this movie's a hoot. I loved it.
Okay, Chris, what is your number 6?
My number 6 is The Mortuary Collection, and this is a horror anthology film, and I am a sucker for horror anthology films. And I gotta say, I gave this a good review, and I didn't give it the most glowing review though, but at least several different people who worked on this movie tracked me down at Fantastic Fest, and they were just the nicest people in the world, and they were so thankful that I gave the film a review at all. So shout out to the Mortuary Collection crew, who are very nice people. The set designer in particular, I singled her out because this movie is a triumph of set design, and she found me in a coffee shop and was just so grateful I even just mentioned her at all. So, because people don't really point that stuff out when they're doing reviews, and they should, especially for movies like this, because it looks incredible. And like all horror anthology movies, it has its dead weight. And there's one story in particular in this movie that is so awful that I really wish they had just cut it completely, because if they had, I probably would have loved this movie even more. But you get your good and you get your bad. This actually, it started off as a short movie called The Babysitter Murders that they expanded into this anthology, and that short is the closing story, and it is without a doubt the best story in the film. And I really don't know what that says, that that movie was made a few years ago, and yet it still is the best thing in this entire movie. So I don't know if that's regressive or what, because you would think oh, it can only get better from there, but really nothing else tops that short. But that short is so good that it almost doesn't matter. The wraparound segment stuff is great. It has Clancy Brown playing this he's basically playing the tall man from the Phantasm series, and he's fantastic, so much so that I just want this to be turned into a TV series where he hosts it every week, just telling a different scary story. So maybe Shudder can get on that. I don't know, but this is a lot of fun. If you like horror anthology films, I think you'll have fun with this.
Yeah, I agree with Chris though that the last segment is so above the board spectacular that the rest of the film feels a little weaker for it. It makes me feel weird to say I wish the entire movie was a little bit better, or I wish the last short was a little bit worse, so it felt like a more even thing. But even if you watch it just for the last segment, I think the last segment is one of my favorite horror shorts of all time.
I'm so happy to hear this, because I'm not sure, you guys probably don't know this, but the producer of this film, Allison Friedman, is actually my neighbor. We share a wall. And,
I actually do know this because she approached me at Fantastic Fest and said, "Peter is my neighbor." And I said, "Wow."
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a really good movie. Overall, it's a lot of fun. I wish that somehow they managed to top or meet the original short, but that short feels like lightning in a bottle in a big way. This is a really cool movie.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Jacob, what is your number 5?
Number 5 is a film that Chris saw and reviewed out of Sundance, so I'll be brief. His quotes are all over the trailer, and that is The Lodge, the new film from the directors of Goodnight Mommy, Severin Fiala and Veronica Franz. And this movie manages to be even more stifling and bleak than Goodnight Mommy. It's about a broken family going to a lodge in the middle of nowhere at Christmas time. It's snowed in. The father leaves for work, leaving his new girlfriend with his children. They do not like the girlfriend for reasons that are set up very explicitly in the early scenes of the film. And soon enough, someone's going crazy. Something's going wrong. It's not clear for a long time who's threatening whom, but somebody in this house is in danger. And the tension ratchets up, and the mystery gets more awful. And it goes some very dark places in ways that I was not quite prepared for. This is a dark, upsetting film, one that I'm not prepared to watch ever again. But The Lodge is also incredibly scary and incredibly intense, and I'm not going to forget it anytime soon. And I know it was originally intended to come out later this year, but I think we just saw it may have been pushed to early 2020. But The Lodge is the kind of like deeply upsetting, horror film that people always claim they want and then get and say, oh, that's too much for me. But The Lodge is a very, very good movie. Chris, do you feel it lingering inside you almost a year later?
Yeah, I actually saw it. I saw it at Sundance, and I watched it again at the Overlook Film Festival because it was like the closing night film there. And I said, "What the hell? I might as well see it again." And I liked it even more the second time. It is really, really bleak. I like it more than Goodnight Mommy. I'm one of the few people who did not actually care for Goodnight Mommy, but while sometimes I can't really handle bleak stuff, I think I can handle this a little bit more just because of how things sort of play out. But I also think this is going to be one of those horror movies that gets a lot of buzz, and then people see it and they're like, I didn't like that because nothing happened, even though a lot of stuff happens, but it's a very slow burn, which is like, that's my jam. I love slow burn horror, but I know a lot of people don't care for that.
Chris, what is your number 5?
My number 5 is a German movie called The Golden Glove, and this is a movie I will never watch again. But I'm glad I watched it the first time. This is, I think, the most upsetting serial killer movie ever made since Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. It has that same sort of grungy, filthy, realistic vibe where it feels like you're not really watching a movie. You're sort of like watching like a snuff film, and it's so well made. And it's based on a true story about this serial killer in Germany, and it's just nasty and it's filthy, and everyone looks like they need several showers, and but it's presented in this weirdly like human way where it sort of like humanizes everyone, even like the killer, even though it doesn't make him sympathetic because it's impossible to make him sympathetic because he's a monster, but it portrays him like not as this like inhuman movie serial killer. He's just like an actual guy who just happened to be a terrible person, and it's a tough watch, and it actually it already debuted in Germany, and it was really disliked there because it's a really nasty movie. But I do think it is worth seeing just to experience how much like artistry went into making this upsetting movie.
Okay, Jacob, what is your number 4?
My number 4 is a new film from Takashi Miike. It's called First Love, and I run hot and cold on Miike since he makes sometimes 5 or 6 movies a year. That's exaggerating, but sometimes he does. Some of his films feel like they're really rushed and cobbled together, and some feel like they're a work of a mad genius. And First Love is the mad genius part of Miike that I really do love. I wish he would slow down sometimes so he could make more movies like this. And this is a film about a boxer who learns he's dying. He's been diagnosed with a brain tumor. He wanders out into the streets of Tokyo, sees a woman being chased by a man, knocks the man out, and embarks on a voyage of discovery with the woman as they both fall in love and go on a self-discovery journey. And while they're off having their, Nicholas Sparks-esque rom-com about discovering themselves, they're being chased by a crime story full of Yakuza and corrupt cops and gangsters, all tied to the guy he knocked out. So it ends up being this collision of storylines as the people who think they're in the Nicholas Sparks movie end up being in this brutal, violent, heads chopping off, gun battle, car chase Yakuza movie. And when both storylines collide for the back, third of the movie, it's really satisfying and a lot of fun. And the movie never manages to lose the draw of either storyline. It's as exciting and silly and crazy as it is really sweet and sentimental. And I was really drawn to just how it manages to let both of those movies collide together in a way that complements them both. I mean, at no point does the romantic storyline feel threatened by the violence and craziness of the sort of like Looney Tunes, Coen Brothers-esque craziness of the other half of the movie. And I don't know, if you're like me and you like sort of get a little wishy-washy in Miike and you don't know where to start with him, don't know where to show movies of his to other people, this one is really accessible. It's really fun. It moves at a good pace, and it has enough, romantic sentimentality and heads being lobbed off with the samurai swords. So I think please everybody. That's First Love. I have no idea what's coming out stateside, but it's worth seeking out.
Okay, Chris's number 4 is the first of some movies about movies. Chris, tell us about it.
Yes, this is Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street, and it's a documentary about Mark Patton, who is the actor in A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. And he's a gay man, and over the years, not really even over the years, even when it came out, a lot of people noticed a lot of gay subtext, or even some people call it just text, in A Nightmare on Elm Street 2. And I thought this documentary was going to really just be about, his experience in making that movie. And while it starts off like that, it's really more about his life and his life after that movie, and his role in activism. And it's just a really sweet movie. He just seems like a genuinely great guy, and it's just fascinating to listen to him talk about his journey, both becoming an actor in Hollywood in the 80s, and he was basically on the cusp of becoming a huge star. And this movie, Nightmare on Elm Street 2, sort of just killed his career, because he was saying that that was his first big movie, and his agents told him, there's no way you can play straight. Basically, you're going to have to be a character actor. And it was at the height of the AIDS crisis, and it just sort of sent him into this tailspin where he didn't want to, be this person pretending to be someone else. And he just gave up on acting. He gave up on Hollywood. He moved to Mexico and opened up this sort of like knick-knack shop. And the movie is sort of about him coming to terms with his career and his life, and A Nightmare on Elm Street 2. And I will say it's not the best made documentary. It has some sort of like amateurish stuff where like it'll switch to black and white for literally no reason and stuff like that. But the message of the movie is so genuinely like moving, and the ending is so like emotional that you're able to overlook the technical flaws and really embrace this genuinely good-hearted movie.
Yeah, the technical flaws are the only reason it's missed my top 10. It's literally my number 11, and it is less. And Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 is a way to talk about the AIDS crisis and LGBTQ men and women of Hollywood, and about all the lessons that Matt Patton's generation learned the hard way that he wants to impart on the new generation, and he's using horror fans, and especially queer horror fans, as a vessel to talk about things that matter to him. So you kind of come for the thinking it'd be, it's gonna be the movie about how Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is so gay, and you leave going, Hollywood in the 80s sucked for gay men. It's not going to happen again. And it's actually really powerful and goes places. I just wish it was better made, because it was a crowd-funded, low-budget project, and you can really tell. But man, that should not stop you. This is a very good movie.
Okay, Jacob, what is your number 3?
My number 3 is a film that everybody will have a chance to see very soon. That is Knives Out, Rian Johnson's new murder mystery starring Daniel Craig. And Chris saw us at TIFF, and he wrote a rave review, so I'll be brief on this one as well. But this movie is just a hoot. It is so much fun. It is practically a one-location mystery where a bunch of murder suspects are in one house, and Daniel Craig has to figure out who done it. And it is a blast. Daniel Craig is playing a character who feels like he's wandered out of an entire book series. He feels very complete in a way that you have to imagine his other adventures in your head even as you're watching this one. And, of course, the murderer's row of suspects, everybody from Toni Collette, the Chris Evans, Jamie Lee Curtis, Michael Shannon, just this great cast, and they're all on fire. They're all this whip-smart dialogue. And it is a very old-fashioned movie. Like I said, Rian Johnson is really leaning heavily on trying to recreate the feeling of the Agatha Christie novel, of trying to bring back the whodunit. And mission accomplished. This movie is so much fun. And Ana de Armas, who is sort of the Watson to Daniel Craig's detective, she's the one who we get to witness his genius through her throughout most of the movie. She is been on the verge of breaking out for a while now, but this is a role that makes me convinced that, I want to see Ana de Armas in more things. Chris, how much does Knives Out rule?
It is so good. This is probably the most entertaining movie I've seen all year, and I second that about Ana de Armas. I've seen her in other stuff. She's in Blade Runner 2049, but this was like the first time I realized, like, oh my God, she's like a great actress with a lot of range, and she's also really funny. Like I don't just mean like her delivery, but she has this really great knack for like slapstick humor, which no one has like exploited until now. And I really do hope this is her breakout role, because in a film with such an incredible cast, I think she's like the standout, and I think that says a lot, especially compared to who she's up against. She is. This is really her movie, and I really hope it gets her even bigger and better things.
Yeah, when I interviewed Rian Johnson after this, and you'll see that interview on the site, close to the release. But one of the things we talked about was how, the heroes of whodunit, like the Sherlock Holmes, or in this case, Daniel Craig's detective, they have to be superheroes. They have to be like sort of the perfect, character who has to have the big monologue in the end where they solve everything. They're the geniuses. And by design, they are the people who can't have arcs. So the movie really falls in Ana de Armas to be the character who grows and changes, and we see the mystery through her eyes. While Daniel Craig is allowed to, sort of have a lot of fun. And that seems so thankless on paper, but she pulls it off so well.
Yeah. Jacob, your number 8 is Chris's number 3, and this is another movie about movies. Chris, what is it?
This is Memory, The Origins of Alien. And, there are a lot of documentaries about movies. And my least favorite type are things that are little more than like fan service. Like there's a movie called Wolfman's Got Nards, and it's all about the Monster Squad. And I love the Monster Squad, but that documentary is literally just scene after scene of people being like, man, the Monster Squad rules. And it's like, look, I agree, but I don't need to watch a whole documentary about this.
And then there's a montage of them talking about their favorite character, and then there's a
right. Yeah. And there was a recent one about the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books, and I grew up with those books. They're a huge influence on me, and that is the same thing. It's 2 hours of people being like, "Man, these books were so cool." It's like, I know. Tell me something new. And this movie, which is obviously it's about Alien, it does the complete opposite. It actually does tell me something new. And Alien is a movie I've seen, at least like 24 times. And, I've watched, the special features on the Alien Blu-ray. And, I was like, I know everything there is to know about Alien. I went into it with that sort of like smug attitude. And even though this movie does have, go over things I already knew, it tells them in this really interesting way that I wasn't expecting. And it ties like the story into like Greek mythology, which is something I had really never even considered before. And I was just really impressed with that. So anytime a movie tells me something that I thought I already knew in a new way, I get really excited, and I really appreciate that. And so this really impressed me.
Yeah, what's cool about this is that there's very few, here was the set, here's how production schedule was like, here's a hard day on this scene. That's very, very little of the movie is production stories, which have been covered extensively. The basic thesis here is that a masterpiece, a level of Alien, comes about and reflects and echoes culture and human anxieties, fears, and dreams and beliefs in ways that even its creators may not understand fully. So the whole, just even the title, Memory, seems to suggest that all great work is derived from a cultural memory that we all share and may not be able to fully grasp. We all tap into it every so often, every decade or so, to produce a movie like Alien. And it proceeds to back it up by bringing in scholars and critics and like scientists and people who are much smarter than me and Chris to explain things that I never would have thought of, both stuff that's in the text of the film, so it's like they're reading, off the text, stuff that involves the literal making of the film, with the decisions they were making, like on the set, but also things that may have been echoed by accident, they weren't even realize they were echoing. I'm really all for this kind of cinematic analysis.
Have you guys seen this filmmaker's other work? Because I know he made a name for himself, The People versus George Lucas, which I did not like. But he in recent years had done there's a documentary about zombies called Dock of the Dead, and then there was one on Hitchcock's shower scene.
Yeah, I saw. I think it's called 42. I forget. It's the whatever the frame rate is of that scene. But I did see
78:52.
Right. Yes, I did that, and that's a documentary that it starts off about Psycho in general, but then it turns into a documentary all about the shower scene. And I actually was reading that this Memory was originally, he was going to do the same thing where it was going to be all about the chestburster scene, but he eventually turned it into something bigger. And I did like the Hitchcock doc. I think I actually like this more.
Cool. Okay, Jacob, what is your number 2?
My number 2 is Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse. Eggers, of course, made The Witch, one of my favorite films of the past decade. And The Lighthouse is a very different turn for him. It's not as bleak and as slow burn as The Witch was. It is, in many ways, it's a comedy, and that's not what I was expecting based on the trailers. The Lighthouse is Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe played lighthouse keepers in the 1890s who were stationed for 1 month on a small isolated island with a lighthouse, and they don't get along. It is a story of bad roommates, and a friend of the site who I saw the film with described it as if it's like Stanley Kubrick making Step Brothers, and it really, really feels accurate because the movie is this surreal, startling descent into madness with these two guys going crazy in a possibly cursed lighthouse. But it's also a movie about two macho dudes who do not like each other, being forced to share a room and hating each other, and really piling on the emotional, mental, and physical abuse as things go on. I was really hypnotized by this thing. It is a deeply bizarre film. It's shot in black and white, and it's not quite Academy ratio, but it's close. And it looks like it was borrowed from the 1930s, very German expressionism in its style. But it's also so silly and strange, and it floats between like near slapstick comedy and then with scenes of like sea monsters and abject horror. And Pattinson and Dafoe are so good. Dafoe's doing his best old-timey sea captain voice, and it's hilarious. Pattinson is just like, he looks like Buster Keaton. He's just taking abuse constantly, his face not breaking. And when these two are just going at each other, just yell. Eventually it breaks, and they start shouting and cursing. And there are scenes where these two are just screaming at each other, and I just could not stop laughing. And I think the key to enjoying a Lighthouse is to realize that yes, it's a upsetting descent into madness, but it's also really funny. I laughed so much, and at the same time I was like chilled to the bone appropriately during other scenes. So when you see a Lighthouse, and you should just realize it's okay to laugh. It's maybe from the director of The Witch, but it's okay. This is a comedy.
Now, Jacob, I was not a fan of The Witch, or as much of a fan of The Witch as you were. Am I going to like this?
That's a really good question. It's not as slow as The Witch was, and there's a lot more actual things going on. There's a lot more dialogue, a lot more, not necessarily plot, but events occur. It is definitely not going to be to all tastes. It is very surreal. It's a lot of odd style, and sometimes place that style over substance by design. I can't promise you will like it, Peter, but I think you should give it a shot because it is so different. It is clearly the same director, but he's putting his efforts in a very different direction.
I'll check it out based on your recommendation, Jacob, but what you just said basically sounded like no, you will not like it.
Yeah, Peter, I'm very curious. I don't think you'll like it, but I really want to hear your reaction to it. I really think you should see it.
Okay. Chris, what was your number 2?
Okay. So my number 2 is first let me just say I love The Lighthouse, and it is a really weird movie, but it has nothing on this film, which is called Reflections of Evil, which is the strangest thing I have ever seen in my life. I watched this on screener. I didn't see it with a crowd, and I can't even imagine what it would be like to see this with a crowd, because I imagine a crowd just collectively getting up and walking out of the theater at once, because it is this. I don't think you can even call this a movie. Honestly, this is like a mixed.
Cry for help.
Yes, it's like a cry for help / mixed media presentation. There's like commercials, like actual commercials, not stuff that were made for the movie, like literal commercials just filmed off the TV. I don't even know what the hell this is. It's the first like 20 minutes, and it feels like an hour, but the first 20 minutes are literally this huge guy staggering around Los Angeles, mumbling, trying to sell watches to people. All the audio is like ADR, like it's just like they dubbed it in, and it's people like doing voices. Like he'll go up to someone and he'll be like, "Hey, you want to buy a watch?" And then this like awful voice will be like, "No, man, I don't want a watch." And then he falls down, and when he falls down, geysers of blood come gushing out of his head. Then he gets up and he's perfectly fine. And then he starts vomiting, and then he starts eating cupcakes. It is insane, and it just keeps going on and on. And the director, he's actually like snuck onto Universal Studios to shoot scenes. And there's a scene where like he goes and he watches a young Steven Spielberg shooting something for like a TV show, and the scene of Spielberg shooting a movie is literally like Spielberg instructing all these grips to throw dummies around while someone else pounds on a car with a sledgehammer. I don't know what this movie. I've never seen anything like this, and as strange as I'm making the sound, it can't compare to actually watching it. Like I felt like I was going insane while watching it, and it's like 2 hours and like 20 minutes long, dude. It's insane. It is, and I feel like that term gets thrown around way too nonchalantly. Like, you know, boy, that movie was crazy. Trust me, when I say this movie is crazy, this is like a certifiably insane movie. Like if this movie were a human being, they would lock it up in an asylum and never let it out.
I want to say I didn't put this in my list because I wasn't doing any of the repertory stuff on my list this year. This was a 2002 film, written, directed, and starring Damon Packard, and it's been restored by the American Genre Film Archive, whose mission is to find the greatest, craziest trash and making sure it's preserved for all eternity in 4K when necessary. And I'm like Chris, I watched this in the theater with a full crowd. And I think we all knew what we were getting into, because you don't pick the American Genre Film Archive screenings unless you kind of prepared for this kind of nonsense. But I didn't see any walkouts. But what Chris is saying is accurate. And seeing it projected in the theater with a friend, so we can turn to each other and like whisper, "What are we seeing? What is happening?" Like every 15 minutes, it's unreal. And I mean, the story here is that David Packard inherited $500,000 and went off and shot this 2.5 hour long cry for help. And I don't even like. There's entire scenes where great chunks of this film with one in Los Angeles are like essentially Sacha Baron Cohen style thing, because he's wandering around against people who aren't actors, who are just reacting to this crazy guy trying to sell them watches. As Chris implied, he goes to Universal Studios and to Six Flags Magic Mountain for another sequence, and he like films at the ET ride for like, extended sequences where like the ET animatronics are talking to him. He's talking back to them. He goes to a movie theater and watches the trailers for whatever films were playing that time. We see almost a full trailer for Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, shot in night vision, while he's like watching people in the theater like harm themselves in grotesque ways. It can never be released. It contains too much stolen footage. There are scenes from 2001: Space Odyssey, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, just inserted in there. And he steals people's songs. He steals like TV show footage and commercials. It is, Chris, this movie made me feel insane. I feel like I was going insane watching it. And then it ends, and then I wanted to watch it again.
You guys are making me wish there was a way for me to see this. Like
yeah, if there ever, I don't know how, if there's like, if I obviously will never advocate stealing movies, but if somehow like a bootleg of this shows up somewhere, like I imagine like if you're in like a city one day and you walk by one of those guys who has like a card table set up with bootleg movies, and this will be sitting on that table.
Yeah, but why would he have this movie? He's gonna have like the big like.
Well, here's what would happen: you would buy the movie, and then you would turn around to ask the guy a question, and the table will have vanished into thin air. And it'll just be, and you'll have the movie still in your hand. So if that scenario somehow happens, please get your hands on this, because it has to be seen to be believed. And then after you watch it, maybe like lock it in a box and bury it in your yard or out, because I feel like this movie is like radioactive. Like if you had this in your house, it would like as you're sleeping, it would seep madness out into your brain, and you would slowly go crazy.
I want to point out that this movie was apparently a bootleg like gem for years. So if that is your thing, I think you can find it. But the American Genre Film Archive, they can never make a Blu-ray of it because it has too much stolen material. They can't sell it. It's illegal for them to actually release in any official capacity. But since they're a nonprofit, they can screen it. So you can look up the American Genre Film Archive's website. And I believe if you're a theater owner, or if you know somebody who has a screening room, you can book screenings of it, and they will supply a way for you to book screenings of anything in their archive. So this is Reflections of Evil. If you have a movie theater or know somebody who does, book Reflections of Evil and watch this thing as soon as you can.
So there you go, Peter. Buy a movie theater, and then you can finally see this movie.
Now, I can't afford a movie theater, but I do know an Alamo Drafthouse Theater in downtown Los Angeles that could have access to this, maybe. So hopefully, fingers crossed, maybe they'll bring it here to LA. But okay, let's move on to our number ones. Jacob, what is your number one film of Fantastic Fest 2019?
I'm going to jump on the bandwagon for a film that people have been talking about for months now, and that is Bong Joon-ho's Parasite, it won the Palme d'Or at Cannes Film Festival. It is South Korea's submission for the best foreign language film. It is from Bong Joon-ho, who made Snowpiercer, Okja, Memories of Murder, The Host, Mother, and I don't want to I feel like I'm building it up too much, but this is the best film I've seen in literally years, maybe 4 or 5 years. I was blown away by this film. It is as if Alfred Hitchcock developed a genuine sense of empathy and curiosity about human beings, in addition to being a master of suspense, he would have made Bong Joon-ho movies. And Parasite is this brilliant, sad, funny, terrifying, dark comedy, satire, drama. I don't even know where to begin to describe it. It is all things. It is all genres. And I don't want to say too much beyond it being about a lower class kid in South Korea who gets a job tutoring becomes an English tutor for the daughter of a very wealthy family, and slowly starts to insinuate himself deeper into their lives. And you shouldn't know more than that going in. But I've never felt my loyalties between characters in a movie be torn so violently, so often. And it starts off being a very funny, dark, sort of con artist movie, evolves into something so much more complex and upsetting, and yes, really, really funny. And this movie should be getting a pretty wide push from Neon, since it's a big Oscar contender. But I do not remember the last time I was this bowled over by a film. Parasite is. I'm gonna say masterpiece. It's a masterpiece, guys. Straight up, it's my favorite film of the year. If something tops this is the best year for film in my lifetime. Because Parasite is one of my favorite films of all time.
Wow. Okay, I'm adding this to my list on Letterboxd. Chris, you saw Parasite?
I have not. I've missed it every chance I've gotten, and also I'm going to call out the PR people handling Parasite, because I've asked them for a screener 3 times. All 3 times they said, "Oh, we're not doing screeners." But I've heard from 3 different critics that they got screeners. So you're lying to me, PR people. Send me a goddamn screener, because I really want to see this.
Okay, Chris, what is your number one film of Fantastic Fest 2019?
My number one film is a film called Saint Maud, and this is another slow burn horror movie from A24. And I knew nothing about this going into it, and boy, oh boy, did this knock me on my ass. This is a movie about a young woman who is very, very religious, and she prays a lot, and she gets a job as a hospice care nurse, and she really wants to save the soul of the dying woman she's caring for. And That's really all I'm going to say, because the less you know about this, the better it is. But it starts off weird and quirky, and it gets very, very intense. And the last 5 minutes are some of the most impressive / chilling moments, like conclusive moments of a film I've seen in recent memory. Like the final scene alone, like the way it ends, then it cuts to black. I was like, I almost like yelled out like "holy shit" in the theater of how it ends. So I don't really know when this is getting a release, and this is going to be one of those movies that I know general audiences are going to be like, that was too slow, but I love this movie to death. It's one of my favorite of the year.
And where are people going to be able to see this?
I don't know. In my house. Come over and watch it. When I get it on Blu-ray, I'll show it to you.
Okay, that does it for today's episode. You can find links to all of the reviews for all the movies we mentioned in today's podcast in the show notes. So check those out, please, and share them, and add these movies to your upcoming wish list, because we are entering the fall movie season. But okay, you can find more of all of us at slashfilm.com. You can find this podcast every weekday on iTunes, Google, Overcast, Spotify. Please send us your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. And please rate and read this podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends. Spread the word. And we'll see you tomorrow.